welcome to another edition of Trail Talk TV. Today we've got James and Publica in the offices. James, how are you doing?
Doing great, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming in. And today we're going to talk about the seismic effects of the new OpenRTB protocol on CTV. And James has kindly come to the office today to talk a little bit about that. James, before we do that, can you give our viewers an overview of what you do at Publica and a little bit more about the company itself?
Yeah, of course. So James Wilhite, head of product at Publica. I've been here since 2020 and focusing on all of our product across ad server, unified auction, SSAI globally. So we have a team of 9 product managers, and yeah, that's about the sum of it.
Okay, before we jump into sort of like what this new OpenRTB protocol update will mean for CTV and buyers and sellers, just give us a quick update or just overview on the SSAI stuff and it's sort of why it's so important for CTV, because I think that's important before we sort of go into the weeds around this new sort of protocol update.
Yeah, that's right. Let me just do a quick diagram of how I think of SSAI, how I explain it, say to my wife or to my kids.
That should be a great conversation. I'll be there.
My kids always ask me, like, Jane or Dad, what do you do? And it's tough when we're talking about.
You just say I work in IT.
Yeah.
That's easy.
It is easier. So basically, an SSAI is a fancy video editor, right? So what you have, and we'll draw some stick figures here. I was practicing these earlier and thinking of what I would do, and it turned out that this looked a lot like ballet dancers, and I was pretty happy with it. So. So let's say you have a piece of content here, right, and it's playing, and these are individual frames. An SSAI looks for signals right here in the middle of the content and does just what you would do if you were doing video editing at home, right? It just splices it and inserts advertising breaks into the content itself. So just for simplicity's sake, so we have a cue out marker, which says we're getting out of the content, and we have cue in to get it back in. And the SSAI says how long this break is going to be. So let's say 60 seconds, right? So with all the complexity of all of the metadata and everything that's being passed, at the end of the day, it really boils down to this when we're talking about ad breaks. So the way that would look, if we take this section and move it over here, and then we have another section and move it over here. This is your new ad break that got inserted. And the way our ad server looks at it is you get a 60-second break that opens up, and then we divide 60 seconds by the minimum ad duration. So the minimum ad duration is the minimum length that the publisher wants to see of each ad in their ad breaks. Normally it's 6 seconds, 15 seconds, 30 seconds, something like that. So in this case, let's just say it's 15 seconds. So 60 divided by 15 is 4, so you end up with 4 ads that come into this break, or 4 available locations to serve an ad.
Okay. Your colleague, Steph Miller, who was in here a couple of weeks ago doing a sort of overview of the technology, was talking about potted requests.
Yeah.
I just want to touch on that again, why that remains critical for buy and sell side, what it means from like CTV buyers from that perspective.
Yeah, it's huge, and it's a big reason why we put potted request into OpenRTB 2.6. So when we were asked to contribute to the spec, what we did was basically take all of our learnings at Publica that we had from CTV, and we wanted to open source it and give it to everybody. And potted request was one of those things that we were doing on a regular basis, but that hadn't been put into the official OpenRTB spec. So looking back at this example, what this would look like to every downstream partner is 4 individual requests sent one at a time, right? So 4 requests to the SSP, 4 requests to the DSP, 4 responses back on both hops, right? So you can see how that is going to kind of cascade down the marketplace as you have multiple SSPs, multiple DSPs, a lot of network traffic. There's a lot of problems with that. So what a potted request does is it takes all of these and puts them into one single request and sends it down. So instead of sending 4 to everybody, you're now sending 1 to everybody all the way down the stream.
Okay, and what does that mean from a buying perspective? So with you all as demand, how does that actually improve things?
It improves a lot of things. So one very obvious one are things like network costs. You're now not sending multiples of the same block of code everywhere down the stream. But you also look at carbon footprint, and then when you look at it from a publisher and buyer perspective, advertiser perspective, what you get here is the availability to see that all of this is related to an ad break. A big problem in advertising on a slot basis is when this is off by itself and this is off by itself, you're going to get that issue with duplicate ads, right? So you're going to see that same nationwide ad over and over,
which is a huge problem, the frequency piece.
That's right.
Yeah.
So now that this transparency is here, that all of these are going to be in the same ad break, you get deduplication.
Right.
So every buyer can see, like, this is going to be in the same ad break.
What ads will I be against? Is that
right?
Okay.
Or
right.
when they return their bid responses, not necessarily the advertiser knowing what ads they'll be against, but when a DSP sends a response, they are sending a potted response back, and they can say, I'm not going to send 5 nationwide ads. I'm going to send 1. Right? So that's one piece, but you also get the availability to target these, right? So a publisher can sell a PG deal and say, I'm going to open up slot 1 or the last slot, or maybe even bookends. I'm going to make that available as a PG so an advertiser can choose to buy where they want to buy.
And is this rules-based? So how does the ad server know what to put where? Is this like rules-based from a publisher point of view, or do you use sort of your own sort of optimization piece to make that work?
Yeah, so for us, we do this based on CPM per second.
Right.
We'll get to that a bit later, but the publisher will decide which slot they're going to serve in, right? So we want to maximize yield for publishers. That's one of our main goals. So in order to do that, you have to maximize on the revenue in the pod.
And you touched on I want to go into the sort of OpenRTB piece now. I want to talk about what that means for the entire ecosystem. So one of the things that people have been telling me that this new update sort of reflects how TV buyers look at the world. So can you just talk from a sort of like overview what that means? Like, so how the changes in the OpenRTB protocol kind of fit the view of buyers, traditional TV buyers?
So for traditional TV buyers, what we want to do is open up the way for them to buy the same way that they're buying on traditional TV in OpenRTB 2.6. So we're laying the foundation, the groundwork now with potted requests. There's other things that we can do in the future, like maybe open up transparency into competitive separation for the buyer to do that, or to be able to tell them, give them the ability to say, I don't want to serve against this content. Those kinds of things are things you can do in OpenRTB 2.6 that you couldn't do before these things came along.
And look, having looked at a lot of CTV content, like Bloomberg was the biggest sort of culprit. I kept seeing the same mad German ad for HP over and over again, even to the point where it became an English ad, and then the next ad would be German of the same ad, and you'd see the lip sync. It was the worst experience. I will never buy HP ever again.
You used to buy HP all the time.
I was a big HP customer. They lost me just there. So James, let's get into the weeds of what an ad pod looks like. So could you give us an example, an overview of how you build these ad pods, and what type of CTV ad pods are there, just from a publisher perspective?
Yeah, of course. So in 2.6, we built out 3 different types of pods. So structured is the first one. And this is kind of how people had historically been hacking pods in 2.5.
Right.
So this wasn't technically part of the spec, right? So what we did there is, let's say you had, again, a 60-second pod. What you would do is just like we showed before, right? You'd split this into 4 different slots within the pod and send a potted request. So this is the standard, right? But this also means that the ad server is dictating the avails, right? So it ends up making it a lot more strict in regards to the demand that's returning. Yeah. So what we added, and again, the reason that we did this one is because of the way that Publica has always worked. Like, we are connected directly to the SSAI. So we thought it made the most sense to allow buyers downstream to have the same controls that we did. And what that means is we just say, you have 60 seconds to fill. Here is the minimum and maximum ad duration. And let's say we don't want any more than 5 ads. So all of these parameters are now available. So I can send this downstream, just like this, without dictating how many avails there are. In this case, they're maxing at 5, but you could send back 2, you could send back 1, you could send back 5. So every layer, ideally, is maximizing on a CPM per second basis and returning their most bid-dense pod.
Okay.
And then lastly is hybrid. So hybrid is pretty much like it sounds. So what it would be instead, let's say you sold your first slot, right? You sold your 15-second slot. And then you wanted everything else to be available. So you would have your 45 seconds. So we have structured on the top, dynamic for the remainder.
So you could argue that hybrids are kind of typical sort of ad ops approach. You have your, front direct sold sort of upfronts type
That's
stuff,
right.
And then you have your unsold or just your ability to kind of increase yield. You have your dynamic piece, which could basically sort of move things up and down the ad server. Basically.
That's right. Yep. So as ad ops, if you're going out direct sold, you want to guarantee that first slot, but you know it's going to be 15 seconds. This is the way to go.
Okay. All right. Great. So CPM per second is going to be a key part of the new OpenRTB protocol. And what does that mean from a buyer perspective? How does that change? It changes sort of how a TV or CTV buyer approach this, and then why is it such a key aspect of the protocol update?
Yeah, of course. So first, let's get into what it is. It's basically the ad duration and the flat CPM. And you want to take the flat CPM and divide it by the ad duration, you get the CPM per second, right? So this is important because at the end of the day, a CTV publisher is selling airtime, right? So when you look at a desktop website, you might have a 728 by 90, some 300 by 250s, et cetera, and this isn't necessarily time-based. This is point in time, what price do you want for this 728 by 90, what do you want for this 300 by 250? And publishers try to make this time-based, and they'll do things like timed refreshes, right? Like this might refresh all of the ads in 3 minutes, 5 minutes, or they might, for their BTF ads, they might come in and lazy load that, so it's gonna load here, so it's kind of time-based a little bit. So they're trying to get around that to make it more revenue-based. But when you start to think of CTV, and again, we have content, it's happening linearly, right? So over time, if you end up selling this block for the same amount that you sell for this block, you're going to run into revenue issues, right? So if we look at 2 different ad breaks, let's say we have 60 seconds to fill, right? And with this one, we're going to fill it with 2 30s. And we'll fill it at $15. And at this one, we're going to fill it with 4 15s at $10. Now, looking at this in a flat CPM model, this would win every time, right? Because you're competing $15 against $10. So this is always going to win. But when you add these together and get your eCPM, you're now getting $30 here, and you're getting $40 here, right? Because you have more time to allot over on this side.
Right.
So when you look at the CPM per second, for this one, you average about a third of $1, so 67 cents. And over here, you average about 50 cents, right? So when we're comparing this way, the CPM per second makes it very clear that this is the way to go.
And from a yield perspective, this is incredibly valuable for a publisher or a streamer or a broadcaster. So is this the way you think the entire sort of CTV market, maybe online video market might go in the next sort of next couple of years?
I don't see why it wouldn't. I think every layer of the decisioning process should be using CPM per second, from the ad server to the SSP to the DSP. If they're not, they're costing the publisher money.
Why is CPM per second floors important in this perspective? Like, so that's another key area of the open part of this. So why is that such a crucial part of the solution?
Yeah, so we introduced CPM per second floors into the spec because of this, right? So if I was to pass a $15 floor for this inventory, these bids wouldn't make their way through.
Okay.
Right? So if we start saying instead that there is, let's say, $1 CPM per second floor,
right,
it becomes more dynamic downstream, right?
Okay,
now you're
right.
at $15 for 15 seconds, $30 for 30 seconds, and it scales up.
Do publishers have a good idea of what they could get in terms of like the value of the breaks? And that reflects on this number here. I mean, this is a number that the publisher obviously can set in the ad server. I take it. I want a £1 CPM per second floor. It's very hard to kind of do a CPM per second. I've never seen it before.
Yeah.
So is that part of this? Yeah.
So the publisher can know that if they, let's say they have historically been doing direct sold, right? And they know how much they're getting. They don't want to undervalue their inventory going out to market. And if you're doing flat floors, they can do just that by selling a $30, a 30-second slot.
Yeah.
And undercutting what they've been doing on their direct sold side.
And I suppose historical analysis will say, well, I'm going to get this over time, therefore that's going to reflect the CPM. And then there's like an average probably across the entire industry that kind of like brings the prices up. In terms of sort of adoption, it's key because you're a key participant in helping to build this new OpenRTB protocol. What's the adoption rate like? I mean, I did see in your presentation that you're hoping that all SSPs will adopt this by
end of summer.
Do you think that's realistic? And is that realistic from a buy-side perspective? Are DSPs, are they adopting it quickly as well? What's the industry sort of feedback around this?
Yeah, that's right. So the whole purpose of this and the pressure we're putting on the market to move forward is because we don't want this to be another OpenRTB 3.0. Right,
okay.
Where it's like,
what happened? In that instance.
3.0 came out, and I don't think that a single person moved over. I was at an SSP at the time when that got released, and the big consensus was nobody else is doing it.
Why should I? Yeah.
So for 2.6, we are completely ready on our side, and that's helped the SSPs move forward. So Index is already live, PubMatic is live, OpenX is live. They're all moving forward. Trade Desk on the DSP side is ready with 2.6.
Okay, that's good.
So the industry is moving forward. We've gotten commitment from every major SSP that we connect to.
Yeah.
They're all going to be done by June this year.
Right, and then are the agencies on the supply side, are they all on board with this as well, or how is that sort of buy side, sell side dynamic informing the process?
Yeah, so publishers are really excited about this.
Well, why wouldn't they be?
Yeah, exactly. So from the revenue perspective, yes, but also from the deduplication. They're sick of getting the same bids back and losing due to deduplication, because the ad servers, not all ad servers, but a lot of ad servers now, the new, like Publica, we were built for CTV, so we're deduplicating on our own. And that means that we're throwing away bids, let's say for the same advertiser domain, the same IAB category for the pod, and that's an opportunity cost, right? The SSP could have sent us another bid that could have filled. So we're costing the publisher money every time we throw away bids based on deduplication. So that's what they're focused on. They're focused on the opportunity cost of not implementing OpenRTB 2.6.
On the demand side, I think are looking to this as well, because you're able to sort of cut out unnecessary waste and the frequency piece as well. Yeah,
that's right. So agencies over the last 12 months have been very focused on carbon footprint, so the ones that I've talked to.
Interesting.
And so that's a big piece of it alone, but being able to target each individual slot or a pod, say I want to target the first pod on a piece of content, on a show, on a movie, they're able to do that now in 2.6. They weren't able to do that before. So it opens up new opportunities for buying.
Okay. So James, thanks for that. Thanks for insight into sort of the new open RTB protocol, and be interested to see how the adoption takes place as quickly as possible and see more money flow into the system.
Yep, thanks. Thanks
So
for having me.
thanks for your time. And that was Trader Talk TV, and we will see you next time.